Yankee was dead. This was the second time she watched her own body, or rather, her shell, disintegrate into ashes, amidst countless bolts of lightning. Purple lightning coiled round her, and then she self-detonated, taking her enemies with her. She died without leaving even a trace of ash. Yankee only had time to say to her disciple, "Live well," before the system pulled her out. She stood calmly by, watching herself die with no expression on her face. She thought it as finally over. Beep. His familiar system prompt sounded in her ear. Yankee patiently waited for it to continue. The usually annoying system voice now sounded even more grating. "Host, since the mission is not yet completed, therefore, what?" Yankee interrupted. "I am dead. What more do you want? Start over, living another decade in this godforsaken cultivation world. How long does a person's lifespan last anyway? I am not playing anymore. Do whatever you want," she said, giving up. After all, there was no hope of going home, so she might as well let it be. The system sensed Yankee's frustration and tried to soothe her. "Please don't be upset. You don't have to start over. Don't get agitated." Yankee remained silent. The system then said seriously, "Have you ever heard of breakpoint continuation? In other words, you've completed most of the task. You just need to finish the remaining part. Now the male and female leads are growing apart. You only need to ensure the female lead doesn't fall for the male lead." Yankee sneered. "Easier said than done. Don't I know my disciple after teaching her for so long? She'd never fall for the male lead. Who are you trying to fool?" The system responded. "According to your guidance, Shi Xi indeed would have no connection with the male lead. But then this accident happened. You died, and she inherited your legacy. According to the timeline, in 5 years she'll join the sect. Competition with the male lead. Once they interact, sparks could fly. Damn fate. So, what do you propose?" The system said. "I will find a way to place you beside Shi Xi, so you can continue to complete the task." Yankee, another shell. The system agreed. "Fine. Raising a child for so many years. What's a few more? As long as it is not starting from scratch, it should be quicker." After dying, Yankee floated in a suspended state, about a meter off the ground, directly facing Shi Xi, watching everything below. Shi Xi, Yankee's disciple of 10 years, and the female lead, stood frozen, tears in her eyes, her face pale as if she had been scared stiff. Yankee felt a twinge of pity. This time, she had brought Shi Xi out to relax. In the path of cultivation, one cultivates both body and mind. After many years of training, Yankee had some real skills and long sensed that Shi Xi's state of mind was unstable. Talking to her didn't help, so she brought her out traveling, fearing she might leave hidden dangers. Watching Shi Xi becoming more cheerful and her state of mind gradually stabilizing, unexpectedly, they encountered a fierce beast halfway. Unable to defeat it, Yankee perished. At least she protected her disciple without any harm. She wanted to complete the task and go home as soon as possible, but she truly cared for this little girl. Yankee's lips moved slightly, knowing she couldn't hear, but still said, "Sure, it is my fault. I can't teach you more. Take care of yourself." The system, "She can't hear you. If you come with me sooner, you'll see her again. She is the female lead. She'll be fine." Worrying is human nature, but the system made sense. Yankee couldn't do anything like this, and was just wasting time. So she said, "All right." The portal to another time opened. Yankee took one last look at Shi Xi and stepped through. In an instant, she was gone. Under the lightning, an entire mountain turned to ashes, let alone the flesh and blood of a person. Shi Xi formed hand seals, casting a spell together. Yankee's spirit, but couldn't find even a trace, not even the ashes. Failure. Cast again. Failure. She seemed oblivious, her hands forming seals so quickly that only after images could be seen. All in vain, until her spiritual power was exhausted. Her hands hands trembled uncontrollably from overuse, her shoulders too weak to lift. Shi Xi, drenched in sweat and exhausted, collapsed to her knees, her hair sticking to her face in disheveled strands, looking pitiful. Shi Xi's lips, pale as paper, moved slightly, struggling to call out, "Master." No response. She called again, louder this time, "Master, Master, stop playing." Shi Xi looked up at the pitch-black night sky. Cultivators have excellent vision and can see in the dark, but she could only see emptiness, with no other living being in sight. It was as if she was the only one left in this world. "You said you would watch me grow up. You promised," Shi murmured. "You liar." Her lips were dry and cracked, her voice hoarse. "I haven't even told you yet. Don't leave me, I beg you." 5 years later, Nandan sect, the triennial disciple recruitment ceremony officially began, drawing a massive crowd. Nandan sect was one of the 4 great sects in the world. To be accepted into its ranks meant a leap to the heavens, a departure from the realm of mortals. Men and women, old and young, all gazed towards the distant mountain gate with fervent hope, though the gate was shrouded in clouds and mist, obscuring it from view. It did nothing to dampen their enthusiasm. Among them was a little girl in coarse clothes, looking utterly despondent. She was squeezed in the crowd, the stench of sweat nearly knocking her out. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, brought on by the scorching sun, she cursed inwardly. "Damn system, this is the identity you arranged for me." It was a far cry from her former position as the sword elder of Nandan. Now she was powerless in a world of powerful cultivators, with no means to protect herself. "I can't believe I fell for your nonsense system. I calculated it as the best and most suitable identity for you. You can directly become Shi Xi's disciple, and then as master and disciple, you can easily complete the task. Yankee, I am her master system, so what? Yankee, how can I face her like this? The dignified." The system cut her off mercilessly. "No one will know if you don't tell them. Isn't it about completing the task? The sooner you complete it, the sooner you can go home. If you're not satisfied, you can turn round and leave now. Let us see when you finish the task." Threats, bare naked threats. Yankee was furious but had no retort. She conceded fine. She consoled herself becoming her disciple's disciple. "Isn't that shameful, right?" "Yeah, right." How would she save face if she got found out? While Yankee was bargaining with the system to no avail, a commotion started. The crowd began to push and shove, and as a little kid, Yankee was forced along, moving towards the mountain gate to listen to the so-called immortal's speech. Yankee's feelings were extremely complicated. The 2 high and mighty figures being addressed as immortals were her own disciples, whom she had personally trained, being lectured by juniors inferior to herself. This feeling, the system smugly said, "You'll also have to bow and salute them later. How does that feel?" "Yankee, please shut up, thank you." One of the immortals, Li, lightly coughed twice, his voice seemingly penetrating into everyone's ears. "Ladies and gentlemen, today Nandan sect is accepting disciples. Children aged 5 to 15 can pass through this gate. Those who don't meet the age requirement, please go home early." Li waved his hand lightly to the side, and a door brimming with blue light appeared out of thin air, causing a wave of exclamations from the crowd. Yankee felt even more conflicted. "Zhao Yi, I taught him that sound transmission technique system. Enough complaining. Just go in. If you can't even pass this selection, you won't be able to see Shi Xi, let alone complete the task." Yankee felt as if she had been stabbed. She mumbled, "You really look down on me." The system replied, "Glad you understand." The words were simple but hurtful, deeply insulting. Feeling dejected, Yankee joined the line of children. Distracted, she stepped on. A small stone lost her balance, almost fell. A gentle breeze lifted her up, and a man's warm voice, "Child, be careful, don't fall." The immortal was elegant and approachable. Yankee's face turned bright red as she stammered her thanks. Leaky shook his head indifferently. "It's nothing. No need to be so formal. If you join Nandan sect, you have to call me senior brother." Yankee looked embarrassed, but inside, she was shouting at the system. How dare he call me a child? No respect at all. The system didn't want to deal with her and simply blocked Yankee, retreating to the system space to download a few long Shi Xi TV series. Watching TV was much more enjoyable. The protagonists were powerful and unstoppable, unlike Yankee, who had to start over with a bunch of kids. How embarrassing. Yankee, realizing she wasn't getting a response, knew the system had blocked her. She could only close her mouth, feeling sheepish. Without anyone, or rather, any system to talk to, Yankee had no choice but to quietly follow the kids through the trials. To think she had helped design these trials back in the day, now they were just traps for her. It was too heartbreaking. By the time she finished the trials, exhausted and barely able to stand, Yankee collapsed to the ground. For a child of about 10, this was quite an achievement. In the realm of cultivation, the most important attribute is the spiritual root. Other sects measure the spiritual root first, admitting those with good roots and rejecting the rest. However, at Nandan sect, anyone who could complete all the trials on their own strength was admitted. The spiritual root was then used to determine whether they would be inner or outer disciples. Those who performed exceptionally well and caught the eye of the elders might be chosen as personal disciples. Yankee had no idea if her performance was good or bad. What she thought in her mind was one thing, but going through the trials with a mortal body was entirely another. When she placed her hand on the familiar light orb, her heart was filled with anxiety. At first, tiny blue stars appeared in the transparent light orb. Yankee closed her eyes, trying to clear her mind and focus all her thoughts on the light orb. Yankee didn't know if the body the system arranged for her had good or bad talents. Her goal wasn't to cultivate to immortality and ascend to the upper realms in this world. She just needed to complete her mission. However, everyone hopes they can be special, superior spiritual root. Yankee breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was not as good as her previous body's perfect spiritual root, it was still decent. Before she could rack her brain on how to connect with her disciple. "Do you wish to become my disciple?" A cold voice, like ice water, left a cool trace in Yankee's ear. Yankee looked up, accompanied by the evening glow. A figure in a blue robe stood straight, the hem and waist embroidered with bamboo patterns. For a moment, she thought she was seeing her past self. She thought she was seeing a ghost in broad daylight. Yankee rubbed her eyes and tried to see clearly, only to barely make out the face. It was Shi Xi, her once shy disciple, who blushed easily and rarely spoke loudly, had changed so much. The woman was now cold and distant, with long black hair flowing loosely down her back, exuding an unapproachable aura. Even her hair was like Yankee's used to be. Yankee used to leave her hair loose out of laziness. But why did she do it? Didn't she love styling her hair into various braids? Before Yankee could figure it out, another voice interrupted her thoughts. "Elder Shi," it was Leaky's voice. "Are you sure?" Yankee was stunned, then felt gratified. In just a few years her good disciple had become an elder. Not bad. Not bad at all. She felt a sense of pride, like seeing her daughter grow up. She ignored Leaky and looked down at Yankee, frowning as she repeated, "Do you wish to become my disciple?" "Of course, I do." This was Yankee's ultimate goal. Although she didn't know why, it was achieved without any effort. She was very willing. The small child, only reaching Shi Xi's waist, nodded eagerly. I do, looking very impatient. Shi Xi's face remained calm. She nodded slightly and said, "Good." She then turned to Leaky Qi, is there anything else? I took her away. According to the rules, after testing the spiritual roots, all disciples were to be selected by the elders based on their performance in the trials. Those not chosen would then be assigned to the inner or outer sect. Li Qi didn't want to break the rules, but he didn't have the guts to argue with Shi Xi. One glare from her end, he was frozen, unable to speak, haunted by childhood trauma. They were of the same age and were both taught by Yan Qi, but their personalities were worlds apart. Shi Xi was cold, showing no kindness to anyone except her master. Her icy demeanor could freeze a person to death. Yet, her talent was extraordinary. At just 20, she had already formed her nascent soul and was exceptionally promoted to elder, taking over her master's position. Didn't even feel jealous, just a sense of bitterness. After her master's unexpected death, life had been tough for her. But why did she suddenly want to take on a disciple? Shi Xi looked at Li Qi indifferently, waiting for his response. Li Qi, filled with curiosity, hesitated to speak. All right, you can take her. Teach her well, said a handsome man in a white robe, who appeared out of thin air. The first part was directed at Shi Xi, and the second part explained to Li Qi. It's my promise, master. The master shook his head, signaling Li Qi not to ask more questions. Shi Xi nodded, waved her long sleeve, and took Yan Qi away. After Shi Xi left, he sent a sound transmission to Li Qi. Kanwu Peak is now occupied by her alone. Adding some liveliness would be good. Life had been tough for this child. Maybe taking on a disciple would help her move on. Shi Xi put Yan Qi down, tossed over a book and a storage bag, then turned and went back to the side hall. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, leaving Yan Qi behind, looking bewildered. Initially, it was just to complete the task, but the headmaster insisted that Kanwu Peak having only one person was unreasonable and asked Shi Xi to take on a disciple, or else the peak would be reassigned to another. Traces of her master remained here, and Shi Xi disagreed. The reason she took Yan Qi as a disciple was simply because she saw a spiritual root similar to her master's. Yan Qi blinked. There was a sense of unreality with Shi Xi's current demeanor. How could she get closer to her? Yan Qi walked around. In the vast Kanwu Peak, there was no one else. Besides the two of them, she randomly chose a room and settled down. She needed to think carefully about what to do next. In the novel called Breaking the Void, all popular elements of male-oriented fiction were covered. The male lead, Zun Mingyang, initially grew up in a small village, with the female lead as his childhood sweetheart. The female lead had no name. She was called Ye by the villagers after her parents died. She grew up on the charity of the villagers until she and Zun Mingyang were taken into King sect at the age of 12. She was like a background and character, naturally becoming Zun Mingyang's main wife, helping him manage all his affairs. In the end, when Zun Mingyang broke through the void, she died at the hands of enemies who were unwilling to let go, exchanging her life for a few drops of regretful tears from Zun Mingyang. The female lead's life was a complete tragedy. Yan Kei's task was to help the female lead stay away from the male lead, to live for herself and not be loved by others. With the female lead's talent, she could have lived well, broken through the void, and then chosen to stay on this land to protect the people. But in the original story, after the female lead died, Zun Mingyang was extremely sad and in his anger, threw a big move that turned the continent, which carried countless lives, into ashes. This wish was, in fact, to save the continent. Yan Kei's original identity was the Sword Elder of Nandan sect. She pretended to go on a journey and took the female lead, who was still eating leftover food in that small village, back to raise her as a disciple, naming her Shi Xi. In the original story, the female lead's name was Zunzi. given by Zhuan Mingyang. When he named her, he arrogantly declared ownership. With my surname, you are mine, and you are not allowed to leave me. The female lead listened to him and was trapped by him for her entire life. Before Yankee died, Zhuan Mingyang had already entered King's sect, as stated in the original story, and Shi Xi had been brought into Nandan's sect by her. Logically, the two should not have any more intersections, but fate is always incredibly coincidental. Not long ago, they met in a competition held between the four major sects, and Zhuan Mingyang fell in love with Shi Xi at first sight, desperately pursuing her. Yankee's task was to completely extinguish the spark between them and break up the pair. Stupid system, why didn't you just arrange for me to appear before they met? The system replies, limited abilities, no specified time accepted. Thinking of this, Yankee sighed. The cabbage she had painstakingly cultivated was about to be ruined by a pig. She was definitely unwilling, but given her current identity, she could only take things slowly and plan carefully. Knock, knock, knock. Yankee got up and opened the door. Standing outside was a face she hadn't seen before. The young girl beamed a bright sunny smile and handed Yankee a space storage pouch. Hello, junior sister. I'm Pang Ziwei, the master's direct disciple. My master sent me over to bring you some things. Senior elder, she doesn't speak much, and this is her first time taking in a disciple. She probably doesn't know how to handle things. We have unified morning classes at the academy, and in the afternoon, we have magic lessons. Here's your token. With it, you can go anywhere without restriction, including the dining hall, which is, of course, free. Yankee hadn't even had a chance to respond when she was overwhelmed by Pang Ziwei's barrage of words. After a moment of stunned silence, she managed to sound, "Thank you, senior sister." Pang Ziwei brushed it off with a smile. No problem at all. My master was just going to send any disciple, but I insisted on coming to see what my little junior sister looks like. Now that I've met you, you're just as adorable as I imagined. Senior sister, I have a question. Why does my master live here all alone? Realizing her words might sound inappropriate, Yankee quickly added, I mean, this mountain is so big. How come there is no one else here? Senior elder, she prefers solitude. Ever since the previous elder passed away unexpectedly, it has been this way. Don't you overthink it. She treats everyone with the same coldness. It is not just you. Oh, by the way, you're the only disciple here on Kanwu Peak, and you're new, so I'll come by tomorrow morning to show you round. Thank you, senior sister. After seeing Pang Ziwei off, Yankee closed the courtyard gate and stood still, feeling a pang of sadness. System, has my disciple been too deeply affected by this? The system thought, is that even a question? Look at what you've done. Of course, she's ended up like this because of you. If you hadn't taken her out, she might still be an innocent and sweet little girl, not the cold, distant person she is now. The system replied, what do you think? A pang of guilt struck Yankee's, prompting her to decide to make amends. How do you cheer up a child? Of course, by cooking something delicious for them. This trick had worked countless times for Yankee. When she first brought Shi Xi back, the little girl was too scared to speak to anyone and would freeze at the slightest noise. To comfort her, Yankee started cooking meals together, gradually coaxing a smile out of her. Now, it wasn't much different, so why not try it again? She quickly caught up with the still nearby Pang Ziwei, putting on a friendly smile and mentioning that she was hungry. Pang Ziwei offered, the dining hall is still open. I could take you there. No need, senior sister. I just want some sweet rice balls. Do we have the ingredients? I can make them myself. Pang Ziwei responded, that's no problem. Wait here for a moment. She hurried down the mountain and returned with a storage pouch filled with ingredients. If you need more, just come to me. Yankee smiled. Thank you, senior sister. Tang Ziwei's heart softened. It asked nothing. If you need anything, just come find me. Yankee, familiar with the place, headed straight to the small kitchen at Camel Peak. She boiled water, mixed the glutinous rice flour, and prepared the rice balls. Only after everything was ready did she realize, wouldn't her cooking be recognizable? The system, with a mischievous tone, suggested, don't you worry. Just add more sugar. She won't be able to tell it as yours. Yankee agreed that as true. Yankee, carrying a tray in her hands, approached the side hall door. She took a moment to mentally prepare herself before calling out, Master. She opened the door and said, calmly, what's the matter? Disciple noticed that you haven't eaten yet, so I took the liberty of making a bowl of dessert. Would you like to try it? As a cook, never have the heart to ruin a dish they made themselves. For a dessert, the most important thing is the sweetness, which must be just right. Yankee had painstakingly added an extra spoonful of sugar. Shi Xi hand trembled as she scooped up a spoonful. It was much sweeter than what her master used to make, though the texture was similar, soft and sticky without any soreness. The sweet soup was thick, and the glutinous rice flour, after being cooked for a long time, had merged with the rice wine. The heat wafted up, and in that moment, Shi Xi's eyes reddened, wanting to lose composure in front of her newly accepted disciple. She forced herself to say, You've been thoughtful. Go and rest for now. She turned round, holding the bowl, and waved her hand to close the door. She stood there, bewildered, blinking in confusion. Yankee system, why didn't my cooking work this time? System, how should I know? Maybe it's just because your cooking is too terrible. These were the only words left swirling in Yankee's mind. Said my cooking was awful. Is it really that bad? My dear disciple used to praise my cooking, but today they just kicked me out. The system didn't care about Yankee's shattered heart. Enough, let's go. Don't you just stand there foolishly. Go back and sleep early. You have to get up early for class tomorrow, right? She's no longer the master of this peak. She has to go back to class with a bunch of kids, starting over from the basics. Thinking about this made Yankee feel even sadder as she walked away. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Shi Xi only relaxed after her spiritual sense detected Yankee had left. The hand holding the porcelain bowl had lost its color from gripping too tightly. Her slender fingers trembled slightly, yet she restrained her strength to avoid breaking the bowl. How could it taste so much like Master's cooking? Shi Xi chuckled to herself. She was truly losing her mind. After Master had been gone for so long, everyone started to resemble her. By the time she calmed down, the soup in the small bowl had already gone cold. She stuffed it into her mouth, spoonful by spoonful. The texture wasn't good after it cooled, and the excessive sweetness made it even worse. The glutinous rice dumplings stuck in her throat, leaving her feeling cold inside, but she seemed not to notice. She continued to swallow every bite. Being a system, of course, it has some abilities, like a wide-angle camera. It could freely observe what was happening around someone. Out of some unspeakable reason, it focused some of its attention on Shi Xi. Naturally, it saw this rather heartbreaking scene as well. In the darkness, the woman silently finished the entire bowl of sweet soup. Under ultra-high definition resolution, the tear stains on her face were clearly visible. A cold and beautiful woman crying silently always evokes pity, especially with that self-mocking smile that followed. The system noticed all of this and, for once, remained silent, refraining from its usual sharp remarks towards Yankee. It watched as Shi groped her way out the door and approached the tightly closed main hall door. She carefully straightened her attire and even produced a comb from somewhere to tidy up her slightly messy hair. The system system was utterly confused. What is she doing this late at night? Yankee had already looked everywhere. Besides the two of them, there was no one else on Kanwu Peak. Who was Shi Xi dressing up for? After tidying up her appearance and ensuring everything was perfect, Shi Xi finally raised her hand and gently knocked on the door, softly calling, "Master, I'm coming in." Then, as if hearing someone respond, Shi Xi softly acknowledged, and pushed the door open. The system followed behind Shi Xi, scanning the entire room. A memorial tablet on the desk. The memorial tablet was set up by Shi Xi. She carefully took a soft cloth from her special pouch and wiped it clean before placing it back in its original position. Shi Xi respectfully bowed to the tablet and then sat down below it. She began talking to herself, speaking about various things, such as her progress in cultivation that day, the things she had done, and the people she had met. Finally, she paused, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Master, I've taken on a disciple." She paused again, as if organizing her thoughts, wondering how to begin. "I randomly chose a disciple to appease the sect leader, someone who seemed pleasing to the eye, but she seems like you. Even the sweet soup she made is almost the same. Well, except her cooking isn't as good as yours. Master, your sweet soup was always the best." The system shuddered, excited, anticipating Shi Xi's realization of the truth, and then only to hear the woman hesitantly say, "Master, you didn't secretly have a daughter, did you?" System shocked. Is this kid blind? How could she not figure it out? The system was almost amused by Shi Xi confusion, while in its mind, Yankee started rambling again. "Hey, system, I've figured it out. If it tastes bad, so be it. As long as she doesn't figure out my identity, it's fine. How is that? Isn't it flawless? My disciple definitely won't recognize it as me. I am such a genius. Ha ha ha." System, let me be blunt. She messed up logic. It's totally your fault. Otherwise, how could a perfectly normal girl mind get so twisted at such a young age? All because of you. No wonder people say that when the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. The system held back and held back, but still couldn't resist mocking Yankee. Hey, back in the day, she was such a quiet and rational little girl. No matter how much she changes as she grows up, her true nature shouldn't change, right? With this in mind, the system couldn't help but hold out some hope and focused on Shi Xi, only to hear her muttering to herself, "No, Master grew up in Nandanmen, and none of the uncles ever mentioned this, so it shouldn't be true. And none of the uncles ever mentioned this, so it shouldn't be true." The system says, "Thank goodness, the kid still has some sense. There's still hope. If she digs a little deeper, she'll figure out the truth." The illegitimate daughter theory still makes more sense. "You didn't even tell me. Am I still your most beloved disciple?" She accused the memorial tablet, complaining, "The system, fuck. She's really being made stupid by Yankee." Unable to resist, she threw an image into Yankee's mind, a smiling JPG. Yankee wasn't happy about it. "If you have something to say, just say it. What's the meaning of throwing a smiling JPG? Isn't that too insulting? I'm just asking if I'm a genius. And even if you don't agree, you don't have to mock me, right?" The system patiently tried to calm her down. "Dear host, I'm expressing goodwill toward you. Please don't misunderstand." "Really?" Yankee was skeptical. "Yes, it's a smile emoji that comes with the factory settings, specifically meant to convey goodwill." "Alright then." After pacifying Yankee, the system took another look at Shi Xi, who had already started using tea as a substitute for alcohol, toasting back and forth with her master's memorial tablet. Great, neither of them is normal. In the end, it's all been in vain. The sky hadn't even lightened when Yankee was sleeping soundly, and suddenly there was a loud banging on the door. Junior sister, wake up. We need to go to the academy for class. What? I'm the dignified pig master of Kanwu and the sword elder of Nandan Men. Who has the guts to give me a class? Even the sect master himself doesn't have that qualification. Yankee turned over and continued sleeping. Before she could fall back asleep, she was startled awake by a sudden song blasting in her mind. System say, "Dear host, it's your scheduled wake-up time. If you don't get up now, you risk being late. You might even be surrounded by onlookers on your first day of class." The voice outside the door continued, and Pang Ziwei raised her voice. "Junior sister, are you there?" Yankee finally woke up and remembered that she had become a disciple of Nandan Men and had to start over. She called back loudly, "Senior sister, please wait. I'll be right there." Yankee quickly washed up and opened the door. The moment the door opened, she put on a sweet smile. "Senior sister, why are you up so early?" "It's not early. Hurry up and get ready. We need to go to the dining hall for breakfast. You can't be late for the academy's classes." Tang Ziwei brought her fingers to her lips and let out a melodious whistle. A white crane appeared before them, completely white with a bright red forehead, its head held high in a proud and graceful stance. Yankee swallowed nervously. "Senior sister, what's this?" "Oh, this? It's the mount my master prepared for me. We're running late, so hurry up and get on." "Wow, it is clearly not an ordinary creature. It's so beautiful." The white crane-eyed Yankee, with its brown-yellow eyes, satisfied with her praise, and lowered its noble head. With a resigned look, Yankee clumsily climbed aboard. The academy's dining hall and other areas in Nandan Men were all located on flat land connected between various mountain peaks. From Kanwu Peak, the white crane spread its wings and plunged straight down the mountain. As the cool morning breeze brushed against her face, Yankee once again began to regret her decisions. Why did she take her disciple out back then? If she hadn't, she wouldn't have died and wouldn't have ended up in this situation. When they arrived at the entrance of the dining hall, the white crane landed lightly, and Yankee jumped off, her face pale. Tang Ziwei gently patted Yankee on the back, helping her catch her breath, and asked with concern, "Junior sister, are you feeling unwell?" No, Yankee felt it would be embarrassing to admit, so she made an excuse. "It's just that it's my first time flying, so I'm not used to it." "Oh, I see. As cultivators, we'll be doing this often in the future, so you need to get used to it." Yankee forced a smile and followed Tang Ziwei inside to find a table. Yankee was a bit sentimental. She had crossed over directly to this time after her death, and although it had only been a few days, it felt like a long time. "Yankee, why do I feel like the food doesn't taste good anymore? Did they change the cooks?" The system snickered. "I think you didn't get enough sleep, and your brain's malfunctioning. Why don't you think about it? For all these years, when have you ever come down to eat breakfast yourself?" she accused in a reprimanding tone. "Always your obedient disciple brought it up and delivered it to your door. If you stayed in bed, she was responsible for waking you up. Of course, food delivered right to your mouth tastes better." Yankee smiled awkwardly. "Don't say it like that. It's because my disciple is filial, isn't it? She respects her teacher, so I had to give her the opportunity." "But why has your tone of voice changed?" The system fell silent. "Shut up and eat." The first lesson was still taught by Li Qi, had been responsible for recruiting her into the sect. Cultivation, also known as the pursuit of the Tao, begins with refining essence. On the high platform, Li Qi spoke passionately, and the new disciples who had just entered the sect listened excitement, as if they were just one step away from achieving immortality and transcending the mundane. Having heard these grand principles countless times, and with the lecture being delivered by a familiar face, Yankee tried her best to keep her eyes open and pretend to pay attention, but she couldn't resist the call of sleep, and ended up dozing off on the desk. Leaky casually formed a hand seal and sent it flying towards Yankee. Startled, Yankee jumped to her feet. Leaky said, "You must focus during class. Since this is your first offense, I won't punish you, but take heed of your actions." Yankee thought, why does this sound so familiar? She slapped her forehead, suddenly remembering that was exactly what she had said to Leaky back when she was teaching him spells.